Can remote therapy be just as effective as in person? Yes. I'm just joking. That's not the entire video. I'm going to go more in depth on this topic and break down why remote therapy can be just as effective as in person. But first, let's start off with the question, what even is remote therapy?
What do you mean by that?
Now, the common one people have in mind, most of the people watching this video are probably thinking video to video therapy, kind of like a Zoom call where the client meets with the therapist via video.
How would that happen?
With some sort of software technology that connects them together virtually, sharing each other's webcams. But there are several different forms technically of remote therapy, some of which include guided therapy. And this is kind of like being in a college or university course where there's not actually a therapist. They may be reviewing some of the stuff, but you're kind of going through modules like any sort of course online. And the goal is that you're making progress, you're checking in and seeing if your symptoms improve. That can be a very cost-effective way to deliver some sort of therapy to a huge population, like when a country offers free services, free mental health services for their citizens. Other common forms, especially in the early days of remote therapy, are synchronous texting, where that's basically like instant messaging, where it's just text, but you are texting with a trained professional. There's another form, which is basically like email, but you'll use some sort of software technology, and it's called asynchronous messaging. And that's when you'll send a message and you may not hear back from your therapist for a few days, or maybe there's a schedule where it's once a week you check in, or maybe it's some sort of platform where it is daily, but it's just not instant. There can also be audio only phone therapy where you're just talking over the phone. A lot of people's work benefits, their employee assistance programs offer these sort of services because it can be very cost effective. But in case you can't tell, I do like technology. And one of the areas that I'm really excited about is virtual reality psychotherapy.
Knock, knock, boomers. The metaverse is here to stay, all right?
I have actually only experienced virtual reality once, going to one of those sort of like arcade places where you could use them. It was right at the start of COVID-19, and unfortunately, all of those things shut down. And the issue with virtual reality, from my perspective, is every time I'm thinking about getting one, they just keep getting better, or they're announcing a better model. But virtual reality psychotherapy is being used. It's being used in centers. I've heard of it being used in like addiction rehab places where the person will put on the virtual reality headset and they'll go in somewhere like a bar. Say they're struggling with alcoholism. They're in a safe area. They're in rehab. They're doing daily work. They're practicing coping techniques. So they can use virtual reality to start triggering some of those senses and triggering their triggers by going into a place like a bar and seeing how they react. And they can talk in real time with the therapist who is sitting next to them, what they're experiencing, what they're thinking, what they're feeling.
What's it all mean?
It can be really helpful in those sorts of exposure therapy techniques. I do remember when I was at the virtual reality arcade playing one of the games where you go up in this elevator, like what seemed like 1,000 feet. And I experienced that. Like I had to walk really, like I couldn't look over the edge, and it was terrifying. My palms are sweating. So I think as virtual reality technology progresses, I can't wait to see its application for psychotherapy. And in case you're completely new to the whole world of therapy, talk therapy, counseling, psychotherapy, there's a lot of different terms that almost mean the same thing. That is kind of just talk therapy. You may be wondering, what is traditional therapy? If we're using the term remote therapy, why is it a new term? I'm just going to read it off here. Psychotherapy, or just talk therapy, is a type of treatment that involves talking with a trained mental health professional, such as a psychologist, psychiatrist, registered social worker, which is me, or a licensed therapist, to help improve mental health and overall well-being. The goal of psychotherapy is often to help people better understand their thoughts, their feelings, and their behaviors, and to develop coping skills and strategies to manage life's challenges. and it typically looks like this. I just want to point out, sitting is the new smoking. Traditional therapy is old school and it's gotta go.
Get out!
I'm just joking. There are plenty of advantages of in-person therapy over remote therapy, but I'm going to break down some of the pros and cons between the both and how they compare with each other further in this video. An important place to start, in my opinion, is the research on remote therapy, and in the academic world is usually referred to as things like telehealth or telecounseling. Now, there's going to be a link down in the description of this video for a blog post about this video, but within that blog post, there's also lots of links to the research. I don't want to make this video about just reviewing meta-analysis and academic papers, but my thoughts on the research for remote therapy is that it will always be behind. Academia moves far slower than technology.
Tell me about it.
So anytime, like virtual reality, something new comes out, it's going to take a few years for the research to even catch up with it. But the links to the research I do include are showing that remote therapy in a lot of cases can be just as effective as in-person therapy. And one of the arguments I'm going to make in this video and also share some tips on is that sometimes the therapists who are deeming remote therapy to be not as good or ineffective or it just can't compare is that they don't have the optimal setup.
Press the Apple thing.
I hope this video is looking somewhat professional. I'm sounding professional. There's a good looking background. You can see me clearly. A lot of people's remote therapy experience, they just use a laptop and it just doesn't compare. Here, I'll even show you an example. So let's pretend a client is meeting me for the first time and it'll look something like this. Hi, I'm Stuart. Nice to meet you. Now let's compare it to a laptop with no other additional settings. Hi, I'm Stuart. Nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Stuart. Nice to meet you. Oftentimes, therapists just aren't set up to deliver the most optimal experience. Okay, now that we got the research and the introduction, all that stuff out of the way, let's jump in to the pros of remote therapy. And I'm also going to talk about after the pros of remote therapy for both clients and therapists. Okay, so let's talk about the pros of remote therapy. Now, like I said, there is a link down in the description for a blog post I did, which goes in far more detail, but typically people like videos to be a little bit shorter, a little bit more concise. I think that's why TikTok exploded. So I'm going to go a little bit quicker. And if you want some more in-depth reasons or just more detail on some of these points, then check out the post down below. Reason number one, you get to choose from a larger pool of therapists. Now, this is for the client side, obviously. When you are only looking for a remote therapist, which a lot of therapists do offer remote, because they have a laptop, it has a webcam, and they're set up to offer video-to-video therapy from anywhere with an internet connection. So if you live in North America, I'm in Canada, for example.
Great fishing in Quebec.
There are limits to that pool. So for example, as a registered social worker, I'm only registered with the Ontario College. That's where I live. So I can only see people in Ontario. I am exploring registering in other provinces. It's just a matter of weighing the sort of pros and cons because there are costs associated with registering with different colleges, and they all have their own annual fees and costs and requirements. But that is still a massive increase for the client. Now, instead of just looking in your town, if you're in a small town, small to medium city, maybe at best there's like a dozen, 2 dozen centers. If none of the therapists there strike a chord with you, you don't build that sort of therapeutic alliance, you're kind of out of luck. But if you're in the States and you're in Alabama, you can choose from any therapist in Alabama who's offering. The amount of therapists that you're able to choose from, there will be too many to choose from. And I think that's a positive, especially if you're looking for a very unique or niched down specialty. Certain sort of challenge that you're trying to overcome. And the second point is convenience and affordability. You can do therapy from anywhere with an internet connection. Obviously, the better the connection, the better the video quality and experience is going to be. But technology keeps improving, and over the next 5 to 10 years, satellite wireless internet connections are going to get better and better, and it's going to be even better for people in very rural areas to experience high-speed internet and to be able to access therapy services.
Now, if you can get Starlink, it's pretty much a guaranteed thing that it's going to give you a pretty good service. You'll get great speed.
But you no longer have to be in town. You don't need, if you are traveling, you're a client, you're in therapy for, let's say, you're going once a week for a few months to reach your goal, and a vacation pops up or a work trip pops up, it doesn't matter because you can do therapy from wherever you are with that internet connection. And it can also make things a lot more affordable. Therapists who are remote only have significantly less overhead costs. They don't have to rent an office. They don't need office supplies. They don't need all the costs associated with owning some sort of brick and mortar business. And hopefully those savings get passed on to the client. Remote therapy can also be a lot more approachable. This is kind of my opinion. I think it's a shared opinion among a lot of clients and other therapists. But if you are very new to therapy and you're an introvert and it's kind of, you're maybe embarrassed or it feels awkward to go to a counseling center, especially in a small town, remote therapy can make it really easy to access it and offers you the comfort of being in a space that you're already comfortable in. Similar to the other points, remote therapy offers choice in location. You get to choose what is best for you. Obviously, again, I can't stress this point enough. It's going to come down to the internet connection.
Are you looking for a fast, reliable internet connection?
There are ways, especially if you're in home, that I share in my blog post, linked down below, how you can improve that connection even if you have to use a mobile device. There are ways you can still improve that connection, be sort of wired in to the modem to have a really high-speed internet, but you get to choose wherever you want to be. And for certain areas, especially for certain kinds of traumas that people are trying to work through, right at the beginning of therapy, it can be really nice to have that choice in location and choose to be where you feel safest. Some of the places I break down in that blog post, I'll just give a quick list of all the different kind of locations you could potentially choose. Your bedroom, your dining room table, your backyard porch, outdoors in nature, your car, which is great for sound, your garage, your home office like this one, your living room couch, at the cottage if you're on vacation, on a beach, an RV camper if you're going on a long road trip. You can keep up with therapy. You can even be in the middle of a lake as long as you have good internet connection, and basically anywhere else. Now, another pro that I don't think gets talked about enough, because I did do a lot of research. I watched a lot of videos and read blog posts about remote therapy, and I didn't see this get mentioned a lot. But for those of us who are first timers or naturally introverts, remote therapy means you get to avoid waiting rooms.
Please.
Now, I don't think this should be an issue. I don't think there should be a stigma where people feel awkward about going into a counseling center. But I also want to validate that people do experience that, especially if they're early in therapy. Going into a counseling center, a therapy office, and sitting in the waiting room is a little bit more awkward than sitting in just like a doctor's waiting room or something like that. I don't think it should be that way, but it is for some people, and that's a valid experience. Remote therapy allows you to avoid that altogether. And another pro, it offers therapy and mental health services to very rural areas. Unfortunately, there are people who live places where they cannot access even just regular healthcare, let alone mental health care. And through the power of the internet, and as satellite internet technology gets better, the areas in which people are living who can't access therapy, the ability for them to be able to do so is going to continue increasing. And remote therapy now offers people, especially people who live so rurally, the closest thing to them is just like a small town of a couple thousand people. There's probably only one counseling center there. And if they don't jive with any of the therapists, then they really don't have many options. Remote therapy, again, boom, you have so many options. Okay, so that last list of pros was mostly focused on the client side. So I want to give some pros for therapists who are doing remote only.
Fun, 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 fun!
Maybe you're currently studying to become a therapist, or ever since COVID, you've been thinking, you know what, I really liked the benefits of when I was remote only. Here are some of the benefits I think for remote therapists. First and foremost, you get to save money. Your overhead costs basically come down to internet and your software. Once you have your setup, I have a microphone, I got a fancy webcam, I have face lighting and a few other things. These are acoustic panels. I break all that stuff down in the post that I link down below. And I'll also include links to Amazon, which are affiliate links, but everything I'm using, everything I'm linking to is something that I have purchased and currently use. So it may help you make a decision if you are looking to upgrade. But yes, you get to save money. And when you save lots of money like that, hopefully you can pass on those savings to your clients so that they can access therapy at a more reasonable price, at a cheaper price. Because sometimes a big barrier to seeking mental health help is either waiting time or the costs associated with it. So if therapists can save money, then so can the clients. Another pro is better work-life balance. If I want to, I can take a nap there for 20 minutes in between sessions. As soon as I'm done a session, I can leave my office, I can go run an errand, I can do that during business hours. If there's a gap between my appointments, that means I don't have to do stuff on the weekend like errands or chores. I get to do some of the cleaning around the house during the weekday because I schedule it in around my appointments. I get to have so much more control over my time and how I spend it around my work schedule, and I don't have to spend time commuting.
Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
I will point out, just to be devil's advocate and make arguments for the other side, that there are times I miss that commute, especially if it's a difficult therapy session or it's later at night. It can be kind of hard to, you press the end button and you're immediately home. I have a wife and toddler, so to end work and immediately go inside to home can sometimes be a bit almost like disorienting. So I have to be more disciplined on my end to build in that sort of carryover time or that in-between time. People who are fortunate enough to be able to walk, I think that's the best thing. If you can walk to your job, it's a 15, 20-minute walk. That's such a good way to sort of unwind, reflect, and process. When I used to commute for grad school, I kind of missed those train rides sometimes. I had 2 hours completely to myself. I could catch up on a podcast. I could, reflect on what I learned in school and just kind of basically choose how I wanted to spend that time in peace and quiet. But I don't have to commute anymore. I live in a small town. I fill up my car less than once a month. So in some ways, it's even better for the environment. Now, similar to clients who get to access more therapists, I get to access more clients. I can see clients anywhere in Ontario at the moment. And if I register in other provinces, I have the potential to see even more clients. This opens from a business perspective. This makes things a lot more viable. For people who are looking for remote therapists, I can reach so many more people. It's also easier for me to work when I'm not feeling 100%. This has really come into play when my toddler started preschool. And every few weeks, especially around wintertime, something new comes down into our house. Some sort of virus or infection or some sort of cold is trying to take us down, and our bodies are fighting it.
Bacteria, we begin with only one. Bacteria, two is what we then become.
I may still be mentally able to do my job, but physically I might feel like I could pass something on to someone. So if I was doing in-person only, I'd be far more likely to have to stay home when I'm not feeling 100%. I also don't have to worry about scents. This is kind of a weird one, but I remembered somebody gave me an aromatherapy device as a gift, and I hadn't opened it for a few months. And I finally did one day, and I started putting, I got 2 essential oils. I got lavender and I got eucalyptus. And I get to turn that on whenever I want. And I do find it kind of calming, especially if I'm kind of plugged up or something. The eucalyptus actually really seems to help me breathe a little better. But scents are very triggering. The mental health field is well aware of this, and we do our best to limit any potential for sense. They can trigger, especially people dealing with trauma, really unwanted memories or feelings and experiences. It can kind of throw them back there. But also people just have like allergic reactions to a lot of different scents. So it's not very respectable to have a lot of scents in a public space. But I don't have to worry about that because I'm the only one in this office. So I get to use things like the aromatherapy. Now, I wouldn't be making a very fair case or argument for remote therapy if I didn't talk about the disadvantages. So let's jump into those.
The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows.
I dive more into detail in the blog post, which is linked below. I expand a lot more on these, but I'll quickly go through what I think can be argued as disadvantages for remote therapy. First and foremost, insurance companies may not cover it. I don't actually run into this issue very often, especially since COVID-19, but in certain countries or geographical locations, some places may not really deem remote therapy as covered by their insurance. So some people who rely on their insurance coverage or their employee benefits for things like mental health coverage, they may not get it for remote therapy. But I would hope that that changes more and more in a positive direction moving forward. Some provinces and states, and depending where you live, don't allow for like out of service providers. So like I said, I need to see people in Ontario, but there are ways. There's been a time where I reached out to, I live where what are called provinces. Ontario is a province. And there was someone who I thought was in Nova Scotia, and I reached out to the college over there. And I was legally and ethically allowed to meet with that person virtually. But that isn't the case in a lot of in-between states or provinces. And that really comes into play when people are really looking for a specialized therapist, someone with a particular niche or mental illness or diagnosis that they need care for. And there's a lot fewer therapists offering that service. You may not be able to go in between states or provinces remotely. The other one is confidentiality, privacy, and technology. The main one here is technology, unreliable technology. If you've ever done remote therapy on your phone, this is the common joke.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
But in terms of confidentiality, this isn't necessarily a disadvantage. It comes more into play when people are like, they only have a few options of where they can do their remote therapy. And if it's at home or if they're in an abusive relationship and they can't really get out, that could really hinder what they're able to do in therapy. And it may make things feel a lot less confidential. Now, privacy, obviously, nothing on the internet is 100% secure. I will point out that almost all of our information is on the internet. That includes, banking, our healthcare records, everything is stored digitally and at risk. So this isn't necessarily a unique risk for remote therapy. It's just something to note. But as I point out in my blog post, Estonia is a country whose entire public service is cloud-based, and they've never had a security threat. And it's been like that for almost 2 decades, I believe, if not longer.
Estonia has the most advanced digital government in the world. Banking, prescriptions, even voting. In Estonia, they're all managed through a single online system.
This allows for things like not having to wait in line or go to a government office to renew things like your license plate and driver's card. If I really urge you, maybe I'll put a link in the description of what it's like for Estonians to have everything cloud-based. It offers them a lot more free time, which is always a plus. Now, this one is unique to remote therapy, is that there is a lack of response and my ability to respond to clients in an emergency situation. If a client is experiencing physical symptoms, for example, if they were to have a heart attack during a therapy session, my ability to assist with that is limited. Now, best practice is that we always check in at the start of the therapy session so that I know my client's location and they have already given verbal consent and signed consent that in a case where I did need to share that information, I'm ethically allowed to, and so that I would be able to phone the nearest emergency services around them and let them know what this person is going through, what sort of help they need, and any other information that might be helpful. I think another disadvantage of remote therapy is that it's not very appropriate and probably should not be used for serious psychiatric illnesses and challenges. People who are experiencing things like psychosis, I don't think they should be relying on remote therapy or that it should be used in that case. Hopefully, there's some sort of center or place where they can receive almost immediate kind of care on an ongoing basis. And as they make progress, as they recover, remote therapy may be an option, sort of like a once in a month check-in, but definitely not at the beginning. It's not appropriate for those really serious mental health challenges. And the next disadvantage of remote therapy, and I probably should have started with this because this is the most common argument against it, is that it overlooks body language. And it's true. I can only see the client from their waist above, depending on what sort of setup they have. And we communicate a lot through our body. And if people have particular goals in therapy, maybe it's interpersonal goals, they want to improve their relationships and how they relate to people, being able to see and monitor and kind of analyze their body language would be way easier, and I would be able to get a lot more information in person. So if body language and how it's used is part of someone's goals for therapy, then they may want to consider really stressing in person and not doing remote therapy. But I do hope things like virtual reality can get us to a place where we can almost not tell the difference between in-person and remote therapy. And that would, again, allow for more access, hopefully more affordable access for a wider range of people's mental health challenges and their goals in therapy. And another disadvantage of remote therapy I will discuss is that from a client's side, it's easier to get kind of scammed or to find unqualified providers. Now, I'm not saying that people, the credentials they have and what school they went to is what makes them a good therapist. I think, there are people who can be therapeutic for other people despite the education or anything they have like that. And you may have people like that in your life who offer you support. But when we are talking about when there's an exchange of finances, so the business aspect, you're paying someone for a mental health service and they actually aren't qualified, you have far less legal recourses available to you as a client. If they are using practices that are unhelpful and they make things your kind of sense of well-being or your challenges even worse, there's less you can do to get perhaps like a refund or to make sure that it doesn't continue on because there's no regulated body overseeing them. So my tip is to really do your research, really understand what qualifies someone as a mental health provider. This is easier if you're using insurance to cover your services because they will already provide you a list of there's only these qualifications that you can use that you'll receive benefits for. But it's typically things like a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a registered psychotherapist, a registered social worker with a master's of social work. Those sort of qualifications are legally able to deliver psychotherapy services to clients, and there's a regulation over them. And if you have been searching for therapists online, you may see, especially on things like Psychology Today, it'll include at the bottom their sort of college number. And this is so that it proves that they are registered with the college. And that may be something to look out for. If someone isn't including that number, it could mean historically they have done something inappropriate, or they were suspended, or they were kicked out and not allowed to provide that service under the college's regulation anymore. Do your research. If you have a friend who works in the mental health field and you're looking for a therapist, it may be helpful to ask them who they would recommend, or which ways you can go about finding one. But the most common forms of finding a therapist online are using directories like Psychology Today. I think that's probably the most popular directory, and almost every therapist, whether it's in person or remote only, is going to be registered on there. So now that I've gone over some of the pros and cons of remote therapy, let's talk about how we can get the most out of remote therapy. I do want to stress that this is primarily the therapist's responsibility. It's for them, they should have everything kind of best practice and optimized to deliver the best remote experience. But the main tip for clients to get the most out of your remote therapy is going to be your internet connection.
Are you looking for a fast, reliable internet connection?
If you're at home, I would highly recommend plugging into your internet through the modem, running an Ethernet cable into whatever device you're using. Even if you're using a phone, you can use a USB-C connector that has an Ethernet adapter so that you can still plug directly in. Most people on average just use what their internet service provider has given them. And those are those sort of like Wi-Fi extender things. Nowadays, they just plug directly into the wall, and they use sort of fancy terms like AI technology to figure out, what devices are using the most internet and to optimize it all. But at the end of the day, though, that technology is far below what's actually available. So again, unless you've gone out of your way to optimize your Wi-Fi in your home and you're at home, it's unlikely that it's going to be as reliable as plugging directly into your modem. And this isn't a huge inconvenience. Even if you're 100 feet away from your modem, but you want to stay at home to do your therapy, once a week is sort of the average at most people go to therapy. So if you were plugging in, it's once a week. You got to take out this long cord, maybe run it upstairs into your device, and then afterwards you can roll it back up and put it away. But it will give you a much more reliable experience.
And now we have to get the Ethernet cable up through the wall again.
And the only other tip is on video and audio. I don't think clients should need to buy the best webcam that's out there. Typically, cameras on phones and laptops these days are more than enough. I would recommend using earphones of some sort, maybe wireless, just make sure they're charged. But this also helps if you're using a device where the therapist's voice is coming out of a speaker because you're not wearing headphones, that can be picked up on both ends, and it can kind of make things not as smooth. The therapist may kind of hear echoes of what they're saying, and it just won't be the smoothest or most reliable way of being able to hear and speak. And if you want your voice to be clearer, it's not necessary, but it could be worth upgrading your microphone or just going kind of the all-in-one package and getting like a headset. Something like this. I've actually had a lot of clients. I find younger clients, especially if they're in like techie university programs, college programs, or they're gamers or something like this, they're already gonna have a headset like this. And I can actually right now switch it over just so you can hear the difference. Let me turn it on.
A few moments later.
Okay, so I just switched it over to this mic so you can hear. It's probably not as good as this one, but it's gonna be a little bit better than like just using your phone's mic or your laptop's mic. Okay, so this part is for tips for therapists.
Should I lay down?
Oh, no, we don't do that anymore.
Now I cover this in far more detail in the blog post, link down below. I'll also include the little, I think it's like a kit link that I can create. But the main thing is internet. I think if you're a therapist delivering remote therapy, if you have to rely on Wi-Fi technology, optimize, go to a computer store, tell them what you do for work, and they'll set you up with the best router to deliver the best sort of Wi-Fi connection in your home. But if you can, plug directly in. I'm in a detached garage right now, so I have over 200 feet of Ethernet going out of the house and then underground with the electrical into the garage, which plugs into a router and then goes into my computer because I have 1 gig 5 internet available in the area, and this provides me more than enough internet speeds and the most reliable connection. So I often joke with my clients that the only technical issues we're going to face is if there is a power outage and there's nothing I can do on my end. Thought I would just do a quick little selfie video just pointing out what I have here. I'll include that in the kit, but I have a Blue Yeti mic. I have the Brio webcam. This is the face light I use. It's in the kit. I don't know the brand name, but I'm not going to keep it on, it's shining right at us, but you can see it already helps even just like that. This is my back desk lamp that I use just to reduce eye strain. I have 2 monitors. They have a higher hertz rate. I point that out in the blog post, why I think that's important and can be beneficial. And I'm actually old school. I take written notes. So the last sort of like technology upgrade I'll do is a tablet, so I can kind of write them in real time and skip that data input step. All right, I just wanted to share what the kit sort of looks like. I put it all together on this thing called kit.co. I got everything I use laid out here: the webcam, microphone, light with stand, desk lamp, monitor, the salt lamp, which keeps tigers away. I've never had a tiger in my office.
By your logic, I could claim that this rock keeps tigers away.
Different kinds of acoustic paneling. I just want to point out you can just use heavy blankets. You don't have to spend money there. This is the stand I use for my mic, and it kind of helps it float in front of me, which frees up space, especially if you're taking notes. And when it's not in use, you can just shove it to the side. I use wired in headphones like these ones, and these are 15 feet. Actually, no, 18 feet. And at a standing desk, it provides that reliability. I don't have to worry about batteries, but when I forget they're in, I can still walk around a bit. And I have some wiggle room there. This is Ethernet cable if you want to plug directly in. I haven't used a USB-C adapter for Ethernet or for plugging into the modem, but this is what I would use if I was going to. I should really test that out one time. And here's the aromatherapy that was given to me, and the desk kind of mount for the Brio webcam. And that allows me to have more freedom of where the webcam is. It doesn't just have to be on my monitor. Wait a second. Let me just optimize that. Thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful, comparing some of the differences, the pros and cons between in-person therapy and remote therapy. So for a lot of folks out there, remote therapy might be the right choice for your future therapy goals. And for therapists out there, I hope I have helped. I hope I've shared some tips on how you can optimize the remote therapy experience. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And subscribe if you want to.